If you have been following this series, you may have reached a very common point. You understand the system better now. You understand labels, definitions, and sourcing. And then a very practical concern shows up. I want to feed real food, but I'm afraid it's expensive. That concern is valid, and it's the number one reason people stop here. So today, I want to slow this down and separate what actually drives cost from what just looks expensive. Raw feeding doesn't fail because people don't care. It fails when costs feel unclear. The first thing to understand is this. Raw feeding does not require perfection. It requires prioritization. Most cost anxiety comes from the idea that you have to do everything at once. You don't. So instead of asking, can I afford the perfect raw diet? A perfect question is, what actually matters the most and what doesn't? The biggest cost driver in any diet is the protein source. But there is the key distinction. Expensive does not automatically mean better. What matters most is that the protein is appropriate for dogs, that it's handled safely, and that it's consistent over time. Budget-friendly proteins like chicken, turkey, and pork can be perfectly adequate. You don't need exotic meat like kangaroo, venison, or rabbit to feed dogs well. Those proteins have their place in specific therapeutic situations, but for the average dog, they often drive cost up without a proportional health benefit. Start simple. You can always expand later. Another hidden cost factor or driver is overfeeding. Most people are used to feeding by volume, cups, and scoops. Raw food works differently. It is more nutrient dense, which means many dogs need less by volume than people expect. When people switch to raw and costs spike, it's often because portions weren't adjusted. Feeding accurately does more for your budget than buying premium ingredients. More isn't better. Accurate is better. One of the most overlooked cost factors is waste, spoilage, freezer burn, buying too many proteins too fast. Budget-friendly raw setup is often boring at first. 1 or 2 proteins, simple storage, clear rotation. When waste goes down, cost anxiety usually follows. Now let's talk about what doesn't need to drive cost. You don't need to buy boutique packaging, long ingredient lists, trend-driven blends, or constant protein rotation of fancy meats. Your dog does not care about the matte finish bag or the custom printed box. Those are signals for humans, and they are built into the price per pound. Marketing often equates complexity with value. Biologically and financially, simplicity usually wins. This part is important. Raw feeding is not an all or nothing decision. Some households feed partial raw, mix fresh food with kibble, or rotate raw meals a few times a week. That still counts. Progress matters more than purity. If cost is the barrier, flexibility is the solution. There is no deadline, there is no perfect vision you have to reach. For Canadian pet owners, there is one more layer to be aware of. A Canadian brand name does not automatically mean Canadian ingredients. In Canada, made in Canada and product of Canada have different legal thresholds. A product can be made in Canada using 100% imported meat. That doesn't make it bad, but transparency matters. Often cost spikes come from ingredient imported through international logistics, not food quality. Brands sourcing from local agriculture hubs like Ontario, the Prairies, or the Maritimes tend to offer more stable pricing. When you cut out unnecessary transport, you are paying for the food, not the fuel. If you're choosing a raw food and cost is a concern, ask yourself 3 things. Am I paying for the ingredient or for packaging and branding? Am I paying for consistency or for novelty? And am I buying more complexity than my dog actually needs? You don't need certainty. You need enough clarity to feel calm. Eating real food should not feel stressful, and it should not feel elitist. You don't need the most expensive option to make meaningful improvement. You need clarity, you need consistency, and you need permission at a time. A simple meal setup would be the following. In the morning, you would feed raw meaty bones, and in the evening, you would feed meat and organs. In one of our upcoming videos, we will go into details about how you set up the perfect and easy raw meal without getting overwhelmed and without breaking the pan. You need permission to move at your own pace. In the next video, we'll talk about how to compare raw options without getting overwhelmed by labels or price tags. I'm Dr. Ghunaim. Thank you for staying curious and for making thoughtful decisions for your dog, one step at a time.